Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today, inshallah, we are going to complete our talk about the different types of price elasticities. In the last class, we studied the income elasticity of demand, cross price elasticity of demand, and today we are going to study the price elasticity of supply and the tax burden or tax incidence. So let's go to the price elasticity of supply. Price elasticity of supply. As we mentioned before, that the price elasticity of demand, PED, the price elasticity of demand equals the percentage of change in the quantity demanded over the percentage of change in the price. And we said that as the price of the product goes up, the quantity demanded goes down in general. And we had 5 cases when demand is elastic, inelastic, unitary elastic, perfectly inelastic. And we had 5 examples, right? In general, we said that as the price goes up, the quantity demanded goes down. So the sign of the price elasticity of demand is always negative. The sign which represents here the negative relationship between the prices and the quantity demanded. Today, let's go to study the relationship between the change in the price and the change in the quantity supplied, which can be shown by or presented by the price elasticity of supply. The price elasticity of supply is or equals the percentage change in the quantity supplied over the percentage of change in the price. In general, or the general supply theory says that as the price goes up, increasing the prices, this will encourage the producers to produce more because they can generate more profits, which encourage them to produce more and more, so the quantity supplied goes up. So as the price goes up, the profits goes up, the ability to produce goes up, the willingness to produce goes up as well. So the quantity supplied goes up, which means that there is a positive relationship between the prices and the quantity supplied, which can be shown here by or represented by the price elasticity of supply. Price elasticity of supply means what will happen, how much is the change in the quantity supplied when the price goes up or goes down. The theory, the general supply theory says that there is a positive relationship between the prices and the quantity supplied. As the price goes down, the quantity supplied goes down as well. So positive times positive, we have a positive sign, negative times negative, positive. So the price elasticity of demand is always positive, which represents the positive relationship between the prices and the quantity supplied. Right? Now, let's come back here to price elasticity of demand. We studied when the price increased by 10%, the quantity demanded might decline by 10%, 20%, 30%, 0, minus 2, it depends, okay? And we determined, due to these or the results of the price elasticity of demand, whether it was less than 1, bigger than 1, equals 1, infinity 0, we determined the type of elasticity. Is it elastic, inelastic, perfectly inelastic, unitary? Here, we should do the same here. When the price increased by 10% or 1%, what will happen to quantity supplied? Increases in general. In general. Maybe by 10%, maybe by 2%, maybe by 3%, maybe by 20%, maybe 100%, maybe by 0. Right? In general. as the price goes up, the quantity supplied goes up as well. All right? If the price elasticity of supply, so it's always positive. And also we have 5 cases for the price elasticity of supply. It might be perfectly elastic, perfectly inelastic, unitary elastic, elastic, inelastic. This depends on the result, the value, the absolute value of the price elasticity of supply. If it was less than 1, it should be inelastic supply. Bigger than 1, elastic. Equals 1, unitary elastic. Equals 0, perfectly inelastic. Equals infinity, perfectly elastic. So we have 5 cases for the price elasticity of supply. All right? So we have 5 cases. The price elasticity of supply might be equals 0. So in this case, it should be perfectly inelastic supply. Equals infinity. Perfectly elastic supply. Bigger than 1, elastic supply. Less than 1, inelastic supply. Equals 1, unitary elastic supply. Right? Tamam? Type. Let's go to the 4 or the 5th cases for the price elasticity of supply. So far, I think so good. It's clear. If the price of chocolate increased by 20%, hence, or therefore, the quantity supplied increased by 5% or 50%. Calculate the price elasticity of supply. Calculate the price elasticity of supply. P, price elasticity of supply, equals change in the quantity supplied percent over change, or the percentage of change in the price. Equals here a positive 50% over positive 20%. Positive 2.5. Is it bigger than 1, less than 1? So it's bigger here than 1. So the supply here is elastic. All right? The general formula for the price elasticity of supply is the same as the price elasticity of demand. We can use the midpoint formula here. Right? So the price elasticity of demand of supply equals Q2, QS2 minus QS1 over P2 minus P1 times the sum of prices P2 plus P1 over QS2 plus QS1. That's it. This is the midpoint formula to calculate the price elasticity of supply. Okay? Tamam. We have 5 graphs. Shows the different shapes of the supply curve. أمسح. We have 5 cases for the demand curve, supply curve. Yeah. Keep silent, please. يلا قرص خلينا نشوف. We finished. Okay. No, okay. Continue. Shall we start? Okay. Not yet. Okay, as you see here, we have 5 graphs that show the different shapes for the supply curve. In the first graph, here we have a supply curve which is close to the horizontal axis. As the price goes up by 20%, we have a movement from point A to point B here. The quantity supplied goes up by 50%. Let's calculate the price elasticity of supply. PES, the percentage change in quantity supplied over the percentage change in the price equals positive 50% over positive 20% equals positive 2.5. The absolute value or the value price elasticity of supply here is bigger than 1. So it should be elastic supply. The price might be increased due to the increasing in demand. And the increasing here in the price might be increased due to the change or the increasing in demand. Like here, let us assume here that demand curve is here. This is the demand curve, 1. And demand increased to D2 here, which leads to an increasing in prices and increasing quantity demand, the quantity as the equilibrium quantity. Okay? So, if supply is close to the horizontal axis, the price elasticity of supply or supply is elastic, right? Number 2 here. The demand supply curve is close to the vertical axis with a higher slope. مظبوط؟ هذا السلوب تبعه أعلى. Change in price over change in quantity. Sorry? طبعا. Here, the price elasticity of supply, PES, change in quantity supplied over the change in price, 10% over positive 20% equals positive half. It's less than 1, so the supply curve, inelastic supply. How much is the slope? A change in price over change in equilibrium. But we have to have values for the prices and the quantity supplied, right? Because to calculate the slope, P2 minus P1 over Q S2 over Q S1. It has a positive slope. Here, PES, 20% over 20%. Unitary elastic, زاوية 45, 45 centigrade. Here, PES, change in quantity supplied percent over change in price percent. The percentage change in QS equals how much? 0 over change in price positive 20% equals 0. So supply is perfectly inelastic. Perfectly inelastic supply. Okay. Here, the last case, perfectly elastic supply. مظبوط؟ تمام. امسح؟ اوكي. difference between the elastic or inelastic or perfectly inelastic supply is determined by time. Or the duration or terms. Which means in the very short period of time, أجل قصير جدا, if the price goes up by 20%, let us assume that we have a blocks manufacturing unit. بعد صنع حجار. Blocks manufacturing unit. And the capacity of the production is, the maximum capacity for production is 5,000 blocks per day or a day. This is the maximum that the factory can produce a day. 5,000 blocks. And someone asked the producer to increase the output, the production, which means that demand, this is the first demand curve, D1, and demand goes up to D2. And he asked him to produce 8 or 20,000 units tomorrow or today, in the very short run. What will happen? He will be unable to produce more because the maximum capacity here is 5,000 blocks a day. In the very short run, increasing demand leads to increasing the prices only with no changes in the quantity produced. So we can say that if supply curve was perfectly inelastic or vertical, and increasing in demand leads to increasing in the prices only. Ish. As in the very short period of time, if demand increases, this leads to, or when supply is vertical, here we're talking about very short period of time. The producer will be unable to produce more, although the price goes up. And the price goes up, the quantity produced will not be changed in the very short run due to the capacity, because the producer will be unable to change, to add more factors production, to add more machines, because it needs a long time here. The more time, the more ability to change or to increase the production. مظبوط؟ تمام. So in the very short run, supply curve will be vertical, and here we are talking about perfectly inelastic supply. To calculate the price elasticity of supply here, as the price increased by 20%, the change in the quantity equals 0. So in the very short period of time, the supply curve will be vertical, and price elasticity of supply will be 0. Let's go to inelastic supply. أنا بالranking بدي أبدأ كيف؟ Perfectly inelastic, inelastic, unitary elastic, elastic, perfectly elastic. بالترتيب هيك بدي أبدأ. Perfectly inelastic, inelastic, unitary, elastic, perfectly elastic. This is case number 1. Inelastic number 2, unitary 3, 4, 5. تمام. The second case, in the short run. طب قال له بدل ما اعطيك يوم خذ معك اسبوع، بس اعطيني الكوانتيتي هذا. شو بيساوي؟ بيعمل modifications, adding more machines, adding more, more raw material, more workers, more cement, more sand, more gravels. مظبوط؟ هيك اللي بصير. So هذا هيك inelastic بصير عندنا as the price goes up and he has more time to produce. In 1 week, he can add more gravels, more sand, more water, more cement, more workers, right? So this goal, or in this case, he can produce, or as the price goes up, when demand goes, this is D1, D2, as demand goes up in the short run, as the price goes up by 20%, he can increase his production by 10% here. Or the percentage change in price here will be larger than the percentage change in demand, in supply. يعني بيقدر ينتج شوية، ما بيزيد الإنتاج صفر، بيزيد أكثر شوي. هذا وين؟ في الشورت رن. Short term. Supply will be inelastic. Sorry. Once again, حاضر. شوفوا بالترتيب. Very short run بيقدرش يغير ولا حاجة، لا قادر يجيب gravels ولا sand ولا water ولا cement، لأنه بده إياها الأشياء على طول هيك، اليوم بده إياها، اللي هو هان. طب خذ يومين واعطيني هذا، بقول له ماشي بجيب more cement, more gravels, more، تمام؟ بجيب هذول. demand زاد by 20%. The production quantity produced زاد ب 10%. طب اعطيني وقت كمان اكثر. increasing demand or increasing price بزيد ب 10%، بيعطي له مجال يزيد اكثر في ال quantity produced. He can produce more. Yes. هذا medium term. طب خذ وقت طويل خالص. اللي هو وين هذا؟ هي. Increasing the prices by 20%. He can produce more larger than the percentage change in prices, because the long run will give the new producers to produce more. في ناس حتخش على السوق هيك. مظبوط؟ طب خذ وقت طويل على الاخر. حتى لو ما طلعش السعر، وكأنه بقول لي هيك even انه البرايس ما طلع، الكوانت بروديوست بيزيد. Let's come back to the price elasticity of supply. PES. هينا رجع. والله ما انا شارد. شوفوا موضوع انه انا امر على نقطه مش فاهمين هذا انسوه. مش يعني انا جاهل للتبسيط. بس عيد الشغله مره ومرتين و20 عشان تستوعبوا لهم. We have 5 terms. One of the main determinants of the elasticity of supply is time, duration, terms, runs. Very short run. Period of time. Number 2, short run. 3, medium run. 4, long run. Thank you. Medium. مد. متوسط. Long run. 5, very long run. We have 5 terms, 5 durations. Very short run, medium, long run, very long run. هذا بالرانكينج تبعه هيك. The price elasticity of demand equals the percentage change in quantity supplied over the percentage change in price. In the very short run, PES. طيب صحيين وقلنا نايمين احنا ايش ابو حمزه ظلمناهم ابو حمزه صحيات ايوه. طيب in the very short run let us assume that you are the producer. You have a poultry farm, a chicken farm, عندك مزرعة دجاج. The maximum capacity of this farm is 3,000 chicks or 3,000 chicks. تمام؟ هذا الماكسيمم capacity to produce. بالماكسيمم المزرعة قديش بتنتج؟ عندي 3000. هذا الماكسيمم capacity. الماكسيمم capacity 3,000 chicks. عندك 3000 صوص خلقين. تمام. And tomorrow you find that demand increased. They need, or the community, the consumers demand increased to 4,000 chicks or 4,000 units. خلينا نقول هذا unit هيك. By tomorrow. بدهم اياهم بكره. Can you meet the demand here? No. It's the very short run. Even if, or although, they might pay larger than the initial price. لو the price كان 7 shekels and they offered 10 shekels per kilogram. And they want the quantity tomorrow. Can you meet the requirements? Can you meet the demand? No. No. So in the very short run, even if the price goes up by 50%, the quantity supplied will be unchanged, constant. هذا وين؟ في ال very short run. صح؟ So the price elasticity of demand, PES, the percentage change in quantity supplied equals how much? 0 over the change in the price, خلينا نقول positive 50% equals 0. So in the very short run, the price elasticity of supply will be 0. Perfectly inelastic supply, right? They will give them more time to increase the quantity produced. بدنا نعطيك شوية وقت بس أعطيني الكمية هاي. بيروح ايش مسوين؟ أنت مزود لي البرايس من from 7 to 10. بقول له أنا بقدر أزيد لك شوية من the quantity produced by increasing maybe اللي raw material. بزيد شوية بعض الشغلات، بعمل modifications، بعمل adding بجيب شوية more chicks, more forage fodder for chicks. تمام؟ بجيب شوية وبعمل بزيد له البرودكشن تبعه. إذا as the price increased by 50%, the quantity supplied might increase by 10%. بسيط. نحسب الالاستيسيتي هان بيكون inelastic supply. طيب في الميديوم ران اعطوا له 50% زياده في البرايسز they will give you اللي هو هذا يونيتري، بيعطوهم كميه اكثر production، هذا increasing the price by 50%. The quantity supplied increased by 50%. هذا unitary elastic supply. In the long term, the producers will change the fixed assets. كمان ايش بيساوي؟ بيجيب كمان مزرعة جنبها. صح؟ مظبوط بشكل بسيط؟ In the long term, as there is profit, they can, or as the price goes up, they can add more, not only raw material, but also they can change the fixed cost. Like they can build or establish in new firms with additional. مش فاهمين ها؟ كم مزرعة عندك؟ One farm with a capacity of 3,000. وقال لك انه طول ما البرايسز بتطلع as in the long term the price goes up. This will encourage the producers to establish, to build a new firms. طول ما في ارباح والبرايسز طالعه حتلاقي واحد جاب عامل مزرعه جنبك بكمان 3000 وواحد جنبه ب 2000. شو اللي بصير؟ The price in the long term, as the price goes up, our profits goes up, and as we have enough time to produce, we have to produce, or this will encourage new producers to enter the market. So, increasing the price here by 50% will lead to increasing the quantity supplied or quantity produced by larger than 50%. يمكن تلاقيه 70%. وممكن تلاقيه 100%, 200%, 1000%. تمام؟ So the demand here or supply here will be elastic. بمعنى السبلاي كيرف راح يكون هيك close. صح؟ يعني هنا بدينا هيك. The first very short run the supply curve was vertical. اللي بعده short run inelastic supply. صح؟ The medium term will be unitary. In the long term, elastic. In the very long run, perfectly elastic. هاي بدين هيك vertical, close the vertical, بالmedium, inelastic, elastic, unitary or perfectly elastic. Let's go to another point, which is the tax incidence or tax burden. Tax incidence or tax burden means العبء الضريبي. Tax incidence. Tax incidence, tax burden. Yeah. Let me ask you some questions related to the taxes. The first, if the government imposes a tax or sets a tax on the producer, who will bear the tax burden? Let us assume that a producer sells flour or cigarette, and the government decided to impose a tax of 10 shekels per pack of cigarette. Who bears the most of tax burden, or whom bears the tax burden? The smokers or the sellers here? Sellers. Why? The question is, my assumption is, I'm thinking in another example, but I will back to the government sets a price, the tax or a tax on cigarettes. Cigarette is necessary products for the smokers, and it's not easy to give up it. The demand for cigarettes is inelastic, right? Because it's important for the smokers. Let us assume that the government decided or sets tax by 10 shekels on cigarettes. يعني per pack of cigarettes أجي عليه قديش 10 shekels taxes. Who bears من يتحمل the tax burden؟ مين يتحمل عبء الضريبة؟ The smokers bears the most of tax burden, and the sellers bear the least of tax burden, because يعني in this case ممكن الكونسيومر bears 7 shekels والسيلر يتحمل 3. صح؟ مظبوط؟ Because the smoker or the product here is necessary for the smokers, right? 10 shekels per unit. Let me assume that the initial price per pack of cigarette was 15 shekels. This is what the initial price per pack of cigarette. حق العلبة قديش؟ 15 شيكل. And the government imposed a tax of 10 shekels per pack. كل باكيت أجي عليه 10 شيكل. Who bears the most and who bears the least of tax burden؟ مين بتحمل الموست؟ ومين بتحمل الليست؟ هذا most، هذا السموكرز اللي هم الكونسيومرز. يمكن يتحمل 70% من التاكس بمعنى 7 شيكلز، وهذا bears 3 shekels 30% or 3 shekels. هذا بتحملها السيلر. تمام؟ طيب why? Because the product here is, the demand for this product is inelastic. هذا inelastic demand. So, if demand is inelastic, the product is necessary for the consumer. It's not easy to give up it. The consumer bears the most of tax burden, and the producers or the sellers bear the least of tax burden. Another example, the demand for apple, is it elastic or inelastic? Apple. The demand for apple is elastic because it has many substitutes. It's not necessary for the consumers. Let me assume that the government imposed the tax by 5 shekels or 4 shekels per kilogram of apple. يعني كل كيلو حطينا عليه 4 شيكل taxes. حقه 10. تمام؟ هذا الانيشال برايس or 6 shekels per kilogram of apple, and the government sets or imposed a tax of 4 shekels per kilogram of apple. What will happen? Who will bear the most of tax burden? Seller, because the consumer consumer will leave the product and try to buy something else, like orange, like banana, like, you know. So here, the demand is elastic, which means the product has many substitutes. The producer bears, or the consumer bears the least. يعني ممكن يشيله 20%. هذا اللي بيحب التفاحة كتير. صح؟ لأنه ما بتنزل للصفر في هذه the producer or the seller bears the most. حيشيل 80%. طبعا هذا مش ثابت 20 و80، ممكن 30 70 25 75. تمام؟ So if demand was elastic, like the demand for apple, like the demand for orange, the product is not necessary for the consumer. It's easy to give up. The percentage change in the price is less than the percentage change in quantity demanded. And in this case, the consumer bears the least of tax burden. Producer bears the least of tax burden. What about insulin for me and for Abu Hamza as a diabetic patients? Perfectly inelastic. أنا وأبو حمزة والعم أبو حمزة بناخد مرضى سكر. العلاج تبع السكر هذا خلي البرايس يزيد 1,000,000% حنشتري. The quantity demanded decrease, the change in the quantity demanded equals 0. Perfectly inelastic. طب حطوا عليها التاكسز، مين بتحمل كل اللعبة الضريبي؟ الكونسيومر. أنا وياه حنشيلها، والبروديوسر يقول لك أنا مالي. تمام؟ So if demand is perfectly inelastic, the consumer bears the whole of tax burden, 100% of the tax. طبعا والسيلر equals 0. Yes. بعكس perfectly elastic، سلعة مش عبال المستهلك. الكونسيومر بيقول لك ايش بدي فيها اصلا مش مدور عليها، فالبروديوسر بيشيلها كلها. وهذا حنشوفه بجرافس هالقد. تمام؟ يعني نص الفكرة واضحة؟ ربع. تمام ممتاز. لا شوفوا ابلكيشنز هان. ماشي هذاك اوكي. In general, tax and subsidies are one of the determinants of supply, or the supply determinants, صح? Taxes. When the government imposes a tax, increasing tax rate, what will happen? The cost of production goes up or increases, صح? هذا this leads to increasing of the cost production. Cost production. The willingness to produce, this leads to a decreasing the profits. Willingness to produce goes down. Ability to produce goes down as well. Supply goes down. صح؟ Supply will shift left. مظبوط؟ لسه خلينا بس. هل قلت بدي اشوف انه elastic, inelastic, perfectly well cases, بس in all cases, as in general, as the tax goes up, supply goes down. تمام؟ Who bears the most and the least of tax burden? This depends on the elasticity of demand and the elasticity of supply as well. But let us separate these cases and discuss different cases with it separate. تمام. So let's go here to analyze the cases. We have 5 cases when demand is elastic, inelastic, perfectly inelastic, unitary elastic. وشفنا الديماند كيرفز مرة بيكون close to vertical, close to horizontal, in neutral. مظبوط ولا vertical, horizontal. The first case when demand is okay. We have 5 cases. Number 1, when demand is inelastic. Inelastic demand. Inelastic demand. Demand. Inelastic demand and supply is neutral. We have 5 cases. I will deal with the supply curve as a neutral. زاوية 45 درجة. مرة بعمل الديماند inelastic, مرة elastic, مرة perfectly elastic, perfectly inelastic, and unitary. تمام؟ طيب. The first case when demand is inelastic. Supply ماليش دعوة فيه. زاوية 45 درجة. تمام؟ يعني in all cases, in 5 cases هذولا, supply will be unitary elastic. Supply. Demand in this case is inelastic. Like the demand for what? Not for a flower, okay. When demand is inelastic, demand curve should be close to the vertical axis. صح؟ هيو. The price, quantity, and supply is a neutral. Unitary elastic supply. بمعنى شوفوا دائما اليونيتري elastic supply بيبدا من الزاويه من هنا. زاويه 45. S1 and D1 as well. This is the original equilibrium point E1. The price is P1 and the equilibrium quantity is Q1. Now let us assume that the government imposed a tax by, and the price here equals 3 shekels. The price per kilogram of a flour here equals 3 shekels. The price per kilogram of flour is 3 shekels. هذا assumption. تمام? Now, let us assume that the government imposed a tax by 1 shekel per kilogram. كل كيلوغرام من الفلاور هذا حملنا عليه شيكل. Now the government, if the government imposed 1 shekel per kilogram of flour, who will bear the most and the least of tax burden? The most and the least of tax burden. Analyze using graph. من الشكل Now, as the government imposed the tax, 1 shekel per kilogram, increasing tax rates, leads to declining in supply. Supply shifts left. مظبوط? So supply curve shifts left. مظبوط? So in this case, supply shifts left. From S1 to S2, parallel relative to the previous one. We have a new equilibrium point, E2, with a new price. P2. How much is it? I don't know. We have to determine now. As the tax rate or tax is increased by 1 shekel, supply shifts left, supply curve, supply decline goes down, supply shifts left, we have a new equilibrium point, right? مظبوط؟ طيب. Now, to determine the whole of tax burden, we have to take a line from A2 here to S1. هذا هيك the whole of tax burden. To determine the total tax burden, إجمالي العبء الضريبي، باخذ من A2 وبنزل هيك على S1 وبحدد هيك. This rectangle represents a P3. هذا Q2. Quantity goes down. صح؟ As tax increases, the quantity بتنزل والprice بيطلع. صح؟ مظبوط؟ طيب. هذا هيك is the total tax burden. rectangle هذا. This is the total tax burden. From P2 to P3 here is 1 shekel. من هان لهان هيك هذا 1 shekel. قديش تتوقع يكون هذا؟ ممكن 3.75 وهذا ناقص 25% 2.75. كيف صارت هين جاية؟ شوفوا. From P2 to P3 هذا قديش الأوريجينال equilibrium price؟ كان 3 صح؟ The price shifts supply shifts left. We have a new equilibrium point. هو البروديوسر بكم بده يبيع؟ حطوا شيكل علينا على البيع الطحين. البروديوسر قديش بيشيل قلنا؟ most. يعني البروديوسر bears most. والconsumer sorry البروديوسر consumer bears most. Consumer exactly. Consumer here's the most and the producer here's least. طب هان كل التاكس بير يونت، يعني لو واحد بده يشتري كيلو قديش عليه؟ عليه ضريبه 1 شيكل صح؟ لو شالها كلها الكونسيومر بشيل 1 بصير برفع السعر من 3 ل 4 صح؟ يعني if the consumer bears the whole of tax burden period قديش بشيل 1 على كل كيلو صح؟ بس هو ما شالها كلها، شال قديش؟ الموست. هلا لو هو قدر البروديوسر يبيعوا اياها من 3 ل 4 شالها كلها هيك كونسيومر، بس هو شايله قديش؟ هنا شايل 75% الكونسيومر، البروديوسر شال 25%. بالسكند اكزامبل اللي راح توضح اكثر. هلا هذا هيك this is the whole of tax burden. خلينا نقول هذا 10 وهذا 7. قديش التوتال تاكس بوردن؟ 1 لو هذه المسافة هيك تايمز 7 صح؟ هذا هيك total tax burden the whole of tax burden كل التاكس بوردن هي هي from E2 to S1 هذا بتحدد منها عندها. هذا اللي بديت فيه في الشرح. To determine the whole of tax burden you have to take a line, vertical line from A2 على منحنى ال S1 هذا. وفي الخمس حالات هذا في الفايف كيسز. والأول صعب لأنه لسه مش واضحة الأمور فيه. تمام؟ هذا هيك الهول اوف تاكس بوردن. طب وين الكونسيومر شير؟ شايفين من هنا هيك هي من هنا هيك اطلع فوق، هذا الكونسيومر شير اوف تاكس بوردن، واللي تحت منه بروديوسر، يعني هذا بروديوسر شير تاكس بوردن، وهذا الكونسيومر شير. هذا الكونسيومر شير، وهذا بروديوسر شير. سكرت معكم ها؟ ولا سكرت ولا حاجه. الاكزامبل الثاني يا عمي بلا فيش وقت بلا في وقت، قديش ساعه؟ ايه؟ لا يا ساد. طب اسمع خليني ارجع له تاني هلقيت يعني، بس عشان بديش شو اسمه، هو في عندنا 5 كيسز بس استوعبوني دقيقه. ايش رايكم؟ بدي اثبت معلومته. ما انتم بدكم تروحوا على شو اسمه هذا احتفالات. طب المناقشه بزياده 5 دقائق ايش يصير في الدنيا؟ طب نشوف الالاستيك. حيوضح الالاستيك، مش هتفهمي هذا لما شفت الالاستيك. تمام. So here the consumer pays 75% of the tax وهنا البروديوسر 25%. Let's go to the when demand is elastic. Elastic demand when demand is elastic. Elastic demand. Like the demand for apple or orange. Quantity, prices. Elastic demand. Demand will be close to the horizontal axis. مظبوط؟ بيكون demand هيك. D1. And supply is a neutral. Unitary elastic. S1. And this is E1. E1. The price equals the 3. تمام? Now let us assume that the government decided to impose a tax by 1 shekel per kilogram of apple. كل كيلو بدنا نحمل عليه شيكل. شو اللي بصير؟ Supply shifts left. Parallel to the previous one. S2 صح؟ مظبوط؟ Where's the new equilibrium point؟ هيها. E2. مظبوط؟ صح؟ How can we determine the government revenue of tax? كيف نقدر نحدد العبء الضريبي؟ الإيراد الضريبي تبع الحكومة. From A2 to S1. From A2 to S1. From A2 to S1. Here, this is the value of the government revenue of tax. صح؟ بالضبط زي هذا. هي. اللي فوق هذا فوق الاي 1 هيك اسمه الكونسيومر شير وهذا بروديوسر شير تاكس بوردن. هنا هيك هاي الاي 1 المنطقة هذا this triangle or rectangle represents the consumer share of tax burden. وهذا وهذا البروديوسر شير اللي تحت البروديوسر شير. هذا this is the consumer share. هذا producer share. هذا 3 3 قديش بحدود قديش طلع 3.25 يمكن، بمعنى انه قدر يبيع السلعه ب 3.25 وهو حمل الباقي. لان هذا 3.25 وهذا نزل في حدود من هلا 2.25 يعني المسافه كلها واحد. هذا وضح اللي قبله نتفه ولا كثير. This is the total tax burden here. هذا هيك. The whole of tax burden. The demand is elastic. The consumer bears least of tax burden, يعني 25%, and the producer bears most of tax burden by 75%. رجال بناخذ تطبيقات يعطيكم العافيه.